The richest households in America owe more money than you ever will, not proportionally more. More, and it is one of the main reasons they stay rich. This is not a curiosity about lawyers. It is a question about whether the word attached to money changes what you do with your life. And the answer, measured under conditions strict enough to publish, is that it does, reliably and by a lot. We file debt as one thing, one number, one feeling, one moral weight. But a mortgage on a building that pays rent and a balance on a store card are not the same object. One of them hands you an asset that produces income while you sleep. The other hands you a sofa that is worth less every year you own it. Your brain puts them in the same drawer. Your net worth does not. Standard economics has a clean prediction about this, and it is worth stating plainly before we break it. If a debt is fully compensated, meaning somebody else covers the cost of carrying it, then that debt should not change your behavior at all. The money is the same. The decision should be the same. Anything else is noise in the model. That is not what happens. There is a name for the gap between what the model says and what people actually do. Debt aversion. Not caution, not prudence, not a considered judgment about risk. A cost you pay for holding debt that has nothing whatsoever to do with what the debt actually costs you. To measure something like that, you need a setting where the stakes are high enough that people genuinely think about them. Law school qualifies. At the country's top law schools, students were graduating with average educational debt between $70,000 and $80,000, and that figure was climbing every single year. In the decade before the study, median tuition at private law schools went from roughly $13,000 a year to nearly $23,000. Over the same period, the pay on either side of the profession pulled apart. So a question that had been philosophical became practical. Was the debt itself steering graduates away from the work they said they came to do? And the money was not subtle. Across the 4 graduating classes in this study, mean starting pay in public interest law crawled from $34,000 to $40,000. Over the same 4 years, the private sector went from $96,000 to $124,000. The two halves of one profession were pulling apart in real time. New York University's law school ran an actual randomized experiment on this question, and the design is genuinely elegant. Admitted students were assigned one of 2 financial aid packages by lottery. Both packages were tied to taking a public interest job. Both were worth the same money. They differed in exactly one respect. In the first package, you borrow for tuition like everybody else, and then, if you take a qualifying public interest job, the school repays that loan for you over the following 10 years. In the second, 2/3 of your tuition is granted outright. It converts into a loan only if you leave for the private sector, and then you repay the share matching the time you spent there. Sit with that for a second, because the design is the entire argument. Same money, same career condition, same annual paperwork. Neither package came with meetings or coursework or a club to join. The only difference between them is the duration of indebtedness. Whether, for 3 years, you were a person carrying debt or a person who was not. If debt is purely a financial object, this experiment is boring. Nobody in either group ends up poorer. The lottery should produce 2 statistically identical groups of lawyers doing statistically identical work. It did not. Look at the classes where the lottery result could not possibly have changed who enrolled. In those classes, the students who never carried the debt went into public interest law at a rate 36 to 45% higher than the students handed an equivalent loan that somebody else was going to pay off for them anyway. There is a second finding, and it is arguably the louder one. In the classes where students learned the lottery outcome before deciding whether to attend at all, the ones offered the package without debt were nearly twice as likely to enroll. The word loan was reshaping the student body before anyone had even arrived. So what exactly is being avoided here? The obvious answers are financial, and the author walks through them and closes each one in turn. Federal education loans of this kind would not have blocked these graduates from a mortgage, a business loan, or a credit card. Both groups filed a similar amount of paperwork every year, whichever career they chose. Nobody was uncertain about their loan status either, because applicants were told their federal loan outcome at the same time as their admission decision. Every financial door closes. One explanation is left standing, and it is not a financial one. What survives is the explanation that sounds unscientific right up until somebody measures it. The psychic cost of holding debt. Not the cost of repaying it, which was covered either way. The cost of being, for 3 years, a person who owes money. Put it in ordinary terms. 2 people each owe $30,000 at the same interest rate. One of them borrowed it to buy a van that earns them a living. The other accumulated it across 3 credit cards over 4 years of ordinary life. The spreadsheet says these are the same liability. Nobody who has held both would agree, and here the spreadsheet is the one that is wrong. Notice what that implies. If the pain came from the size of the debt, both groups should feel it because both groups signed for the same amount. What differed was how long the debt sat on them. 3 years of law school, then 10 years of repayment against nothing at all. Debt aversion, at least here, is a tax on duration, not on magnitude. And this is not confined to law students. It turns up wherever anyone bothers to measure it. People clear mortgages and student loans faster than the arithmetic recommends, giving up better returns elsewhere in exchange for the feeling of owing less. That pattern has been filed under irrational for decades. It is more useful to file it under expensive. Now the part that most channels skip entirely, which is the part where we ask whether any of this is actually true. The author raises an alternative explanation herself, and it is a good one. The scholarship had a name. Winning it announced to your friends and your family what you intended to do with your life, living up to a label that other people can now see may be doing some of the work here rather than the absence of debt. The paper calls this a commitment to type, and it predicts the very same result for a completely different reason. And there is a second caution, which comes from the data rather than from theory. You will find quoted online that this study proved debt drives graduates away from clerkships. It did not. That difference appears only in the classes where the lottery also changed who enrolled, which makes it a fact about which students the offer attracted, not about what the debt did to them once they arrived. One more limit, and this one is mine rather than the author's. This is a single elite law school, a single profession, and a group of people who by definition had options. Whether the same effect governs somebody choosing between a trade qualification and a loan for a van is an open question. Plausible, not demonstrated. That distinction is the difference between a finding and a headline, and it is the reason this channel will keep boring you with study design. A number that survives the design is worth changing your life over. A number that does not is just a sentence that happens to sound true. Before we get to you, the finding has a direct institutional consequence, and the author states it plainly. If you run a school and you want your graduates in public service, paying off their loans afterwards is the weaker instrument. Not charging them in the first place does more for the same money. Now, bring it back to the drawer we started with. The wealthy are not less frightened of debt because they are braver, or better informed, or unusually rational. They have split one category into two, and they only feel the fear about one of them. Which means the useful move here is not to go and borrow more money. It is to stop letting a single word cover two opposite objects. Debt that buys something which pays you is an instrument, and the fear attached to it is a cost you are paying for nothing at all. Debt that buys something which decays is a bill you simply have not received yet, and there the fear is doing its job. In practice, that is 3 questions, and they take about a minute. Does this debt buy something that will still exist and still earn in 5 years? Would I make the same choice if the payment were called rent instead of a loan? And am I clearing this early because it is optimal, or because I want the feeling of it being gone? And one uncomfortable flip, because this effect runs in both directions. If avoiding debt can pull you away from work you actually wanted, then fear of debt is not automatically the safe setting. Sometimes the cautious choice is the one quietly costing you the most, and it never appears on any statement. The students in that experiment were not bad at arithmetic. They were reacting to a feeling that the arithmetic did not contain, and it changed which careers they spent their lives in. That gap between the number and the feeling is the entire subject of this channel. Next time, the experiment that took 13 IQ points off a group of farmers without touching their brains and handed them back a few months later. Same people, same test, different bank balance.